we've got Mark, pronouns are he, him in Canada, who's bringing the scientific evidence for the Exodus. Mark, what's going on?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Yeah, good.
Awesome, Mark. How are you?
Good. Fantastic, thank you. Yeah, so I got. Can I have my minute, or do you guys know is that only a Matt Bill Hunting thing?
I would say just dive in, man. Just dive in.
All right, I'll dive right in. So here we go. So in 1500 BCE, there's the Santorini eruptions, which were some of the biggest eruptions in history that we can track, and they were all along the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
It was during the reign of Pharaoh Akhmosa the first. There in his stelas, it talks of a people being expelled from Egypt called the Hyksos. It talks of a singular god raining plagues upon Egypt, as well. It has a pictorial of water with a knife cutting it. Now, during his reign, and his name is Akhmosa, which in Hebrew, Akh means brother and Mosa means Moses. So his name actually means brother of Moses. Now, some of the stuff we've seen repeat through history with eruptions. So in Cameroon, they watched their water turn blood red due to the iron that came up from an underground eruption. In turn, from the chemicals in the water, the frogs jumped out of the water. The lice and the flies and the disease of the animals is caused from the dead fish and other animals drinking the water and dying. The boils were actually repeated in that same particular Cameroon incident. Through the carbon monoxide mix in the air, it caused big boils on the people on the land. Hail and fire, which is described as a plague, has actually been repeated through volcanic ash clouds. The moisture in the air mixes together and it rains down hail that appears to be ice and fire. The locusts, which were known to be in that area of Egypt in huge migrations at the time, they tend to be moved during weather disruptions. The darkness has been repeated through volcanic clouds, and they've actually found the ash clouds in Egypt as some more evidence for the Santorini eruptions. The firstborn death, that was repeated. The people in Cameroon, the carbon monoxide came through the water, and as they slept, it killed almost everybody in the village that was on the ground. The the Israelites were told to stand up by God. They were told to be ready to go. So they were all awake, which is why none of them would have been affected by the carbon monoxide. The firstborn Egyptian boys slept on the ground because they were in buildings, and then the rest of them slept on the roof. I'm almost done.
Mark, yeah, you know you are done.
Question.
So, Mark, you might like this, Forrest, because because the call screen said the scientific evidence for Exodus. So, Mark, I just want to ask you one really simple question. When you hear the words scientific evidence, what do you think something has to be for it to qualify as scientific evidence?
So in the Bible, in order to get proof for God, right? So this is a fallacy. We expect some sort of divine proof. The only way to really prove a divine God.
Mark, no. I'm just going to mute you again. So I'm going to try this again. I asked you, what is scientific evidence? When you use those words, what do you think that means?
Scientific evidence, in my opinion, would be things that we can test and observe, right, through history. So the eruptions causing these things is a form of scientific evidence that these things are caused by this cause. And then dating the Santorini eruptions to 1500 BC is a way that we can line up scientifically with the story tells with what we've actually seen repeat in history through the science of observation through volcanic eruptions under mass water, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm wondering real quick, just like, so if we've got a story about some stuff happening and then some stuff that happens elsewhere that kind of looks like the stuff described in the story, how do we figure out if one is the scientific evidence for the other? I wish there was a scientist here. Wait a minute.
So I actually have a totally different question it's kind of similar, but like my whole thing is like, number one, I want to be very clear, Mark. I don't believe what you're saying because most of the things you said didn't make a lot of sense scientifically, like carbon monoxide moving through water and then asphyxiating people. Don't really have a reason to believe that that's possible or a thing. But like, even if that was true, this is the biggest thing that like I have the whole time you were talking. The biggest question I have is, even if I believed you, even if every single one of those things did happen or was shown to be possible, so what? that doesn't do anything to back up the story, because if I can prove that one dude over here can fly, that does not prove that Superman is real, because a different claim, different story, entirely different thing. Also, like, it doesn't back up any of the divinity claims in that story. Even if you could prove all those things happened in Egypt and all of a sudden Egypt had a shitty week and all of these insane things actually did really happen and there was a scientific evidence behind it, that doesn't prove a God. That doesn't prove Moses. That doesn't prove any of those things. So like, every single claim needs to be tested and have evidence for it. And saying that these things are possible isn't evidence. And saying that there's some other civilization that had some things happen, which again, can't stress this enough, I do not believe to be the case. Like, that doesn't do anything to back up the Exodus of the Bible, which is what you said you were calling about. So I guess my biggest question is, who cares?
So the carbon dioxide did kill the people. Look it up in Cameroon. It absolutely climbed across the water and killed the entire
Carbon dioxide can kill people, and carbon dioxide is soluble in water, but like, in the concentrations you're talking about, and also you said carbon monoxide a minute ago, which raises even further questions. So like, there's a lot of variables in what you're saying that don't add up. Yes, those things are technically possible in the same way that it's technically possible that I grow a third arm, but there's a lot of shit that has to happen in a lot of very specific ways for that to occur. And just because it's possible doesn't mean that it's reasonable or that it happened or that there's a God or any of that.
The best way to keep this on the rails here, Mark, is let's deal. Mark, hang on. Let's deal with one specific claim. So if, like, pick your favorite from all the stuff that you just mentioned, and we'll look at it and see if it's evidence for anything.
Sure.
Okay, can I just address really quickly what Forrest said? Because in order to prove a God, a divine spiritual being, right, we need to verify the claims of the Bible, and that's what this is all about, right? If we can verify the claims of the Bible,
no, we don't.
Then we know that it's plausible what God said. So to say who cares, it's not fair. Do you want proof or do you not want proof, right? The show says zero proof.
You could verify. Excuse me. You could verify every single historical claim in the Bible. It would do zero for proving that there is a God. That is a totally different claim.
It does. It backs up the claims of the Bible.
So okay, let's try this.
Because lots of things have happened in New York. That doesn't mean that Spider-Man comics are real, because they also happen in New York, right?
I think the best way we could approach this is to like put a claim on the table, and we'll see if it's evidence. And we'll try this out right now. Let's do one.
Sure, let's go into it.
So there were millions of tons of rocks that fell at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea that they found, which they theorized, because they've seen, caused a tsunami, which would have forced the waters to recede and come back violently, which is exactly what the Bible says. They crossed the water as it receded. It came back violently and killed the Egyptians.
My first question is, who's they?
So that right there.
Who's they? You just said they found and they theorized. Who's they?
The scientists. Why do you guys always go to that, right? They is fine when you guys want to use scientists, but when other people quote scientists or use the consensus, then it's always who's they. My question is, who's they on you, right? They is the scientists that study the Mediterranean Sea and the Santori eruptions from 1500 BCE. That's they, right?
Mark.
Okay, so you said there's a bunch of rocks that fell into the sea. Where do the rocks come from?
From the side of the seawall. It collapsed, right?
So rocks fell into the water. Rocks fell into the water, right?
Into the water, yes. Millions of tons of rock.
How did that make water recede?
That receded the waters. Sorry?
Right. How would that make water recede? Because when there's a tsunami, as a result of an earthquake, water is displaced one way, and then it shockwaves back the other way. When you displace water by adding things to it, it wouldn't make any sense that it recedes for two reasons. Number one, because force is going in the other direction. And number two, because you just added volume that water cannot penetrate. You literally removed the space for the water to recede into. So saying that adding rocks to water makes the water go backwards makes zero sense.
So have you never jumped in a pool? Take a bowl of water and drop a rock in it for us. That's exactly what it does. It all spreads away from it, which is exactly what tsunamis.
And then what? Then what happened?
Unless the rocks fell into the Red Sea, there's no way that it would have displaced water away from the Red Sea. yes, it displaces water in all directions away from the mass that you just put into it. It wouldn't pull it away from a water source hundreds of miles that way. Unless the rocks fell into the Red Sea where the Israelites were supposedly walking, then there's no way the water would have moved away from there because of rocks being added. That doesn't make any sense.
So how do tsunamis happen, Forrest? How do these violent?
I just explained that.
If not displacement of, well, that's exactly it. So yeah, I'm not saying that as the rocks fell, the water opened and they crossed. I'm saying it caused a tidal wave, which went back and forth like tsunamis do. It receded the water long enough for them to cross, and then came back as soon as the Egyptians were crossing. This is the story, and this is what we know in
if it
science.
Went back and forth like that, then there would have had to have been. If it went back and forth like that, then the water would have had to have like increased and gone up and encroached on the landscape at least as much as it receded, because, you know, we always have conservation of energy. We can't have the perfect, you know, back and forth. So the water would have had to have swollen up a huge amount and then receded away, and then somehow stayed away long enough for all these people. What were there? Hundreds of thousands of Israel slaves all passing through there. And then it rushed in. Like, that's several different ridiculous things all happening back to back.
That's the divine. That's the point. Is we can see that something like that happened through the million tons of displaced rock. We know a tsunami would have been caused, and the Israelites said that it gave them time to walk through. Right? I don't really care if you believe it or not. You can't deny the science there, right? That's the point. That's the point of this show. You want evidence.
There isn't science there to deny. There's no. Tsunamis don't behave that way. Look, I'm not a geologist or a meteorologist, so I'm here about
guys.
it.
Isn't that how you know when a tsunami?
Mark, I'm just going to ask you one. Mark, I'm muting you because there's a bigger question that I have to ask you. What does Exodus 14 say happened?
Sorry, the beep cut me out. What was that?
What does Exodus 14 say happened?
Exodus 14? You want me to get my Bible and read it, or do you have it in front of you?
Well, you're saying that this is how you explain, like this, you're saying you're giving the scientific evidence in support of the Exodus narrative, and you're talking about the crossing over the Red Sea, and you're saying that rocks fell and there was a tsunami. I'm asking you what the story says happened.
So the story said that the waters receded. Moses held his staff up and receded the waters, right? And they crossed over, which they also find a land bridge in the Red Sea. So they may have crossed there. So they didn't.
Mark,
the waters
slow down.
Didn't even have to recede fully.
Mark, all I was asking you was, what does it say? What does it say?
It says that Moses raised his staff and calmed the waters, right? He receded the waters.
So what it says
it says that there was a strong wind, doesn't it?
A strong wind is what the story says.
Also, I'm looking at it right now. It says that they walked on dry ground with a wall of water with their left and their right. So there were the walls.
This is where the whole thing that you're doing, this whole project that you're engaged in, is like weird to me as a person who was a Christian for more than 20 years. Because the whole story is the Israelites, they get up to the Red Sea, they're freaking out. The armies of Pharaoh are closing in, and God's like, what's up? Why are you guys panicking? Moses, stretch your rod out, and I'm going to divide the ocean. You guys are going to cross on dry land. And it says that a strong wind comes. Why are you not defending that? Why aren't you talking about meteorology? Why are you talking about rocks at the bottom of the Red Sea?
It also says that there were walls of water to their left and right side. So like that doesn't sound like a tsunami.
Great tsunamis would cause great winds, right? So the fact that they didn't know that millions of tons of rocks
were causing cause winds.
Stop! No, Forrest, go for it. You're nailing it right now.
Tsunamis. So that you're talking about like 15 different things and trying to conflate them all together. That's not how tsunamis behave. That's not how wind behaves. Also, that's not what the story says. The story says that they walked on dry ground with I've pulled it up right here, with water on both sides of them, walls of water around them. And then the second they got to the other side, that Moses put his hand out or his staff out, and it brought the waters back at that exact moment. The story here says that the water behaved in this way and then in that way, and that's all that happened. It doesn't talk about like a tsunami or anything like that. And also, tsunamis don't act the way you're saying. Like, none of this makes any sense that you're saying. And again, I cannot stress this enough. Even if that made sense, it wouldn't verify the story. It would just say that things like this are possible. Finding rocks in the bottom of the water that could have potentially caused tsunami doesn't mean that these things happen. We would need a lot more evidence. For example, it says that it swallowed up all the people of Egypt, including the Pharaoh. We should find remnants of that there. And even if we couldn't find remnants of that, we should find records of that. You know, in Egyptian culture at this time, the Pharaoh was basically a god. They would have written that shit down. If the god died today, they would have noticed that. Also, they kept tax records and records of like how much grain was harvested in a season. Why didn't they write down the one time when hundreds of thousands of slaves escaped? Like, there has to be multiple lines of evidence for somebody to be scientific. You can't just say, here's this one thing that kind of looks like this, therefore it's real.
Yeah. Mark, I'm just wondering, like, and I want you to address this because the story talks about wind. You're talking about rocks. Did the Bible get it wrong?
No. So there, like I said, there's a land bridge across the water. So the fact that there was water on both sides doesn't disprove anything. Second, great tsunamis,
Okay, I'm stopping you again because the Bible doesn't say jack shit about a land bridge. The Bible says that a strong wind divided the sea. It doesn't say shit about a land bridge. So what are we talking about?
See, but you guys are saying there's water on both sides. How could that be? I'm explaining that they found a land bridge across.
We are not saying that.
That's
We're
not
saying that.
walls
The
of
Bible
water.
says that. The Bible says
Having
that
a land bridge above the water does not mean walls of water on each side of you, right?
Yeah, the Bible says that God caused this strong wind to divide the sea and that the Israelites cross on dry land. Okay, doesn't say anything about a land bridge, doesn't say anything about rocks falling in. I'm wondering, like, if you're going to talk about the scientific evidence for the Exodus, why have we been talking about rocks for the last 10 minutes?
Well, do tsunamis create great walls of water? They don't do
Tsunamis aren't caused. Tsunamis aren't caused by wind.
Water
Tsunamis are not caused by great magical winds that come from a god.
They cause wind, right? Waves that big are going to cause some.
Tsunamis do not cause winds.
Tsunamis don't cause wind.
And Pharaoh Akmosa, you're referring to the Pharaoh. Why didn't they write it down? If you look at the stelas they found of Pharaoh Akmosa, it has a pictorial of water with a.
Buddy, listen, Mark, I'm not doing this. I'm going to ask you exactly one more time. The Bible talks about great winds blowing. I want to know, why have we been talking about rocks for the last 15 minutes?
I just told you 30 times. The rocks were the cause. The wind was a byproduct, and the land bridge was the reason they seen water on both sides.
So again, I'm asking you, Exodus doesn't say Exodus. All right. Exodus doesn't say anything about rocks. Exodus says winds caused by God were the cause for the sea being divided. So did the Bible get it wrong?
Because they didn't see the wrong. How would they know? They don't know what the science.
How would they know?
Right.
You know what? I agree. How would they know? I'm done with you, Mark. This is wild for you to call in and say you're going to provide the scientific evidence in support of the Exodus narrative, but then when I talk about what the Exodus narrative actually is, you're like, well, how would they know what the fuck was going on?
Right. Tsunamis also, like, again, I'm a biologist. I'm not a meteorologist. So if I'm wrong, somebody call me out. But like last I checked, wind is caused by differential heating of air due to exposure to the sun and the rotation of the earth by a smaller effect. Not like tsunamis don't fucking cause wind. Like that doesn't make any sense. And also tsunamis don't stand still. So like, yeah, there might have been a wall of water from a tsunami. It isn't going to hang out there. And there wouldn't be one on each side. It said that there was one on both sides of them. Two tsunamis that both parked right here. What is that?
I mean, if you're going to argue that there was some supernatural wind holding back two tsunamis, that'd be a whole different set of claims. It also wouldn't say anything about what's said in Exodus. In Exodus, there's a sea. Israelites freaking out. Moses stretches out the staff. God causes the wind to blow to divide it. That is the claim. So if you're going to bring scientific evidence to support the Exodus narrative, that is what you have to deal with, my friend, not rocks at the bottom of a body of water.